Well, from September 15th, 1944 to November 27th, 1944, nearly 28,000 Marines and infantry troops would fight well-entrenched Japanese troops on the island of Peleliu. Now, this battle was brutal and saw some of the worst fighting in the entire Pacific theater. Nearly 40% of all Marines and troops that fought in this battle would either be killed or wounded. And unlike places like Guadalcanal or Okinawa or even Iwo Jima, the battle for Peleliu went virtually unnoticed. In fact, most of you here probably have heard of Iwo Jima and never of a place called Peleliu. You certainly couldn't point it out on a map, I'm guessing. It became a variance, for various reasons. It was not very publicized. But the greatest reason was that it was a very controversial battle. In fact, even during the battle, as it was happening, most higher-ups believed it was an unnecessary battle. Later on, they would realize it really was unnecessary. Nevertheless, the 1st and 7th Marines, along with some other infantry troops, fought in 110-degree weather for 2.5 months until they finally secured the island. One of those who was on Peleliu was a young man named Eugene Sledge. His nickname was Sledgehammer, which if I was ever to be in the military, that's what I want you to call me. I want you to call me Sledgehammer. That's a pretty good name. Eugene had just landed in the Pacific Theater after going through his training as a borderman. And before the invasion of Peleliu, he had just gotten into the Pacific area, and Peleliu would become his first encounter and experience with combat. The war would then take Sledge to some of the most brutal battles in all of the war, including the battle for Okinawa, which a battle that is considered to this very day happened in the worst of conditions and saw some of the most savage combat the world has ever seen. Later in life, Sledge would document his experiences in the Marines and the combat he experiences in places like Peleliu and Okinawa. Unfortunately, or I should say ultimately, the war didn't sit very well with Sledge, as it didn't for many of those who experienced it. Upon his return to the States after the war, Sledge would struggle mightily with PTSD and scars of all that he had seen and experienced. And eventually, this led him to pen one of the greatest war memoirs ever written, a book called With the Old Breed. Now, I've read countless war memoirs. It's one of the things that I love to read. I love to read memoirs of war, especially around World War II. But none of them compare to Sledge's book. With the Old Breed is one of a kind. Because Eugene doesn't hold back in this book. He discusses his disgust of the war and the effects that it had on those who experienced it. Nor does he allow the reality of war to slip away from us. He describes his experience in excruciating detail, forcing you to enter a world most of us could never even imagine. And then towards the end of the book, Sledge makes a comment that has captured his readers for decades. It's one of his most quoted quotes in the entire book. It is quoted all the time. And he talks about the only good thing that he ever experienced in war. And this is what he writes. He says, "War is brutish, inglorious, and a terrible waste," Sledge writes. "Combat leaves an indelible mark on those who are forced to endure it. The only redeeming factors were my comrades' incredible bravery and their devotion to each other." The only redeeming factors were my comrades' incredible bravery and their devotion to each other. Throughout the book, Sledge would periodically comment that the only reason he survived this God-forsaken experience was because of the men in his company. It was his unit and the guy standing next to him that enabled him to keep moving forward. Their bravery and their commitment to each other was the only reason Sledge ever climbed out of a hole and ran a half a mile across the wide open airfield on Peleliu while artillery rained down on him. The only reason he did that was because of the other men in his company. And though we may never experience combat like Eugene Sledge did, there is a very real war occurring right now. And it is affecting us every single day. Whether you're aware of it or not, there is a war that is affecting your life every single day. Paul describes this war in Ephesians 6. He says this, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, much like Eugene Sledge and the first Marines did, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." And during the last few weeks, we have talked about the importance of understanding and knowing this war that is going on in the unseen world. Things that we can't smell, touch, taste, hear, right? But things that we are experiencing and is having an impact on our lives each and every day. We've learned how we can begin to fight back and be prepared for those attacks that come from the devil, our enemy, on a daily basis. And the importance of preparing and leaning into God's Word, God's truth, as the one single weapon that we have against the devil. And if you miss any of those weeks, I highly recommend you just go to our website. You can watch them all there. It's well worth your time. And as we come to the conclusion of this series, there is one more thing. There's one more thing that we have to prioritize if we intend to be successful in our fight against the devil and his evil ways. And it's something that we know to be true. We know we need this. But I think we often place it on the back burner or take its importance too lightly. And I think it's best described in a book called Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes. If you have a Bible, you can turn there with me. Ecclesiastes chapter 4. You can download that Fancy YouVersion app and follow along that way. Highly recommend you get that, whether you follow along or not. All right? So we're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Now, if you've never read the book of Ecclesiastes, it's not real long, and I would highly encourage you to go home today and just read it. It's well worth your time. All right? The book is actually written by a guy named Solomon. And Solomon was the king of Israel following the reign of King David. But Solomon wasn't just another king. There were a lot of bad kings. Solomon was one of the good ones, for the most part. He was one of the good ones. Solomon ended up becoming the wealthiest and the wisest king, and eventually the wisest man to ever have walked this earth other than Jesus. In fact, upon him taking his kingship, God grants him the opportunity to ask him for one thing. And Solomon asks for wisdom. And God is so impressed by Solomon's wish that he gives him everything else. He's like, since you asked for that, you're going to get everything else. All the wealth, all the power, you're going to have everything you need. But he becomes this wise person who ends up leading Israel into a new stage, a new season of their lives. And as Solomon's life comes to an end, he writes a memoir of sorts, similar to that of Eugene Sledge. A memoir of things that he has learned throughout his lifetime as God has granted him wisdom. And the book of Ecclesiastes is filled with priceless insight and wisdom into the life that we live, including what he describes in chapter 4. This is what he writes in chapter 4, starting in verse 9. "Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple-braided cord is not easily broken." Essentially, Solomon makes it clear that if we want to walk through this life successfully battling against the troubles we experience, successfully battling against the enemy's attacks on our lives, we need other people around us. It is not a battle to be fought alone. Your life is not to be gone through alone. The battles we fight in this life are not to be fought in isolation. Just go back to verse 9 real quick, okay? He said, let's read again what it says. It says, "Two people are better off than one, for they can," what? What can they do? Help each other. Right? And then in verse 12 it says, It says this, 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is what? Not easily broken. Listen, throughout my life, I can tell you that when I was isolated, I struggled the most. And when I was in community with other people, like-minded community, Jesus-following people, things were different. I succeeded in ways that I didn't in isolation. In fact, sociology has researched time and time again and told us that if you want to achieve greater things in your life, you need someone around you to help you. You need community. If you want to achieve any sort of goal or overcome any sort of obstacle, your success rate greatly increases when you do it in community with other people. It's not just biblical, it's also real life. We experience this all the time. And so the same is true when it comes to our spiritual battle. Right? If we want to win the battles we are encountering daily, we can't fight them alone. This is not a one-person battle. Success over temptation and sin is best won in the context of community. You need other people around you. You know, so many people go through life, and maybe you can relate, struggling with a particular temptation or sin, something that devil just keeps attacking you with. And they'll say things like, I've tried to stop, but I can't seem to, or I've done everything, but nothing seems to work. And while the struggle with sin is a very real thing, I'm not trying to discount that, I'm also often astonished to hear people say those things are they're battling, they're doing in total isolation. Nobody knows about it but them. And even if they did know about it, they're not really taking the time to really pour into the community that they have. It's why James says in James chapter 5, he says, confess your sins to each other, then you will be healed. That community that we need, that true community that we have is a powerful weapon when it comes against the devil and his attacks. Like Solomon says, a person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer. You know, my story took a turn for the worst when I became isolated. In my early 20s, I decided to remove myself from any real community that I had to that point. I pushed the people who loved and supported me the most to the side, and I just sort of decided I'm going to go at this alone. I got this figured out. I won't go into detail on all that happened, but I'm just here to tell you it turned out real bad. It turned out real bad. And then I made this decision. I moved to the North Shore of Lake Tahoe, and I made a decision to get in touch with a group of Jesus-following people. I didn't actually seek it out. They found out about me somehow and invited me. I was like, all right, fine, I'll try this. And my life changed. Drastically changed. All of a sudden, these things that I had been battling against for so long, as I confessed them, as I talked about them, as they prayed for me and we supported each other, it wasn't so hard to overcome those things. There was a community of people, a group of friends that kept me from continuing down the road that I was going and encouraged me in a new direction. It totally changed my life. And looking back, I can see that God in that time was teaching me the value, the purpose, and the power of community with people who are following Jesus, who are curious about following Jesus. It formed this bond among us that was far stronger than anything I could have done on my own. And even though I struggled in life with temptation and sin, its hold on me was far less potent. It sort of released some of those chains. And the reason was quite simple. And if you're taking notes, write this down. Community fuels commitment. Hear that again. Community fuels commitment. Research shows that if you want to achieve a goal, you're 65% more likely to do so if you have others supporting you. Those in isolation with a specific goal are less likely to achieve it simply because they've decided to try to do it on their own. And the same is true when it comes to faith and fighting this battle against sin and evil. Your commitment to Christ, your commitment to follow Jesus, your commitment to fight against sin and temptation and to move forward in life will quickly wane if you just try to do it on your own. However, if you step into community with others, fighting against temptation and moving forward and following Jesus, it will fuel that commitment that you have. It is fuel to the fire. Paul describes it this way. He says in Galatians chapter 6, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourselves. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ." We are made for community. We are called into community. This life was never intended to be done alone. And when we come together for the purpose of helping each other become who God wants us to be, it fuels that commitment. Community fuels that commitment to that very end. In fact, this was such a critical element in God's plan for our lives that even Jesus would need it and example it for us. On the night before Jesus was arrested and it led to his execution, he decided to spend some time praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. To go alone and to pray. Only he's not really alone. Yeah, he's kind of off at a distance alone, but there's others with him. In fact, he makes a point to invite some of his closest friends to come with him. And here's how the story unfolds in Matthew chapter 26. It says, "Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane. And he said, 'Sit here while I go over there to pray.' He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, and became anguished and distressed. He told them, 'My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.'" The community that Jesus formed with these 12 young guys was fueling even his commitment to be the sacrifice for all of sin. And as Jesus prays to God in the Garden of Gethsemane, he begs God, if there's any other way for this to happen, let it be that way. And each time he finishes praying, he goes back to this ragtag group of guys, his little community, and he's like refueled again to go back and pray again. It just keeps fueling that commitment in Jesus. Now granted, if you know the rest of the story, Jesus' little band of brothers doesn't quite get what's going on. In fact, they keep falling asleep and it's kind of a mess. But ultimately, Jesus knows, I need these guys in my life. I need them to be a source of fuel for the commitment that I have to doing and carrying out what God has called me to do. And later on, you see in the book of Acts that Jesus dies, he resurrects from the dead, and he calls this new community of people to go now. It's your turn. I want you to go and spread the good news. You see these small groups of communities pop up, and their commitment is fueled. I mean, it is lit on fire to bring the good news of Jesus to the world. So I want us to have a very honest conversation for a minute. Because I can't emphasize the importance of this topic enough. Not just in our battle in the unseen, but in all areas of life, we need community. You see, I see this happen all the time. When a person makes a commitment to follow Jesus, there's this initial excitement. And it's amazing to watch. They just light up, and they're committed to being here on a Sunday, and they start reading their Bible, and they pray on a regular basis. Maybe they even start serving at some level, and they start, oh man, this amazing thing. Before long, something happens. That excitement starts to wane a little bit. The fuel in the battle of the unseen world, man, it starts to diminish. And that commitment that they once had starts to take a backseat to the battles of life. And the reason it stops coming, it comes down to one thing: a lack of true community. They never took the step of getting into a group that will support and challenge and encourage them in their faith. They never experienced how community fuels that newfound commitment they have to Jesus Christ. The statistics show that when a church gets above 35 people, you have to break things down to smaller groups. After you get above 35 people on a Sunday, it becomes extremely hard for you to experience true community just on a Sunday morning. Last week we had 192 people at our church, which means That we have to find ways to break down into smaller communities of people if we want to experience true community. Being here on a Sunday is an amazing thing. It is going to inspire you. It's going to move you. It's going to challenge you. It's going to encourage you. But if you're going to just try to find true community here on a Sunday, you're going to struggle mightily. We've got to break it down into smaller groups of people that meet outside of this room to challenge and pray for and encourage and be of support and care for one another. Which is why we have Genesis groups. This is a major part of our strategy, if you will, to help all of us learn how we can better follow Jesus, how we can better connect with each other and be supported in the commitment we have for Jesus. We want a place for you to connect with others in a way that fuels your commitment to Jesus. We want you to have a place where you can fight the battles of life and you don't have to do it alone. Where you can have people around you, not only supporting you, but going, I understand you. I get it. I'm with you. We want you to experience the power that comes with being with other people who are wrestling with their faith and their purpose and their commitment to Jesus. You know, the thing that disheartens me the most is when I see people make the commitment to follow Jesus and then never take that step to get in a group. Because I know, based on Scripture and experience, that apart from that smaller community, right, the chances of them staying committed is very, very slim. Jesus preached to thousands, but his community was a group of 12. And he knew that that was something so important for him and for these young believers that they needed that support. They needed that community. And listen, the other part of this is this. There are people at this church, there are people who don't even call Genesis home yet, but who will someday, who need you. They need you. It's not just about what you need, it's about what the whole church needs. Somebody in this church needs your support. They need your encouragement. They need you to challenge them. They need you to bear their burdens and fight their battles with them. They need you to help fuel their commitment to follow Jesus. It's not just about us, it's about others. Right? It's about others experiencing community through us as well. So where are you today? Where are you with this today? Are you experiencing how community can fuel that commitment in your life, or are you trying to just fight this battle alone? Are you being a source of fuel for someone else's commitment to Jesus? Are you supporting and challenging and encouraging others in a small community of people? And if the answer is yes to that, then don't stop. Never stop. Keep going. Don't give up on it. Keep at it. But if your answer to that question is no, then I want to give you a chance to take that step today. I want to encourage you to take a step into community this morning. Even if you're on the fence about this whole commitment to follow Jesus thing, being in a community with those can begin to fuel that commitment. It maybe tip you in the right direction with that commitment. So here's the deal. Today, and during the next few weeks, we are really encouraging you to get connected to one of our groups here. And we have a variety of groups. In fact, I think we have close to 12 groups now. A number of them are totally full, but we have 8 to 10 of them that have room for you to get connected to community, for you to be of support to somebody else and encourage and be challenged. And we have all sorts of groups. We have groups that meet in the morning and groups that meet in the evening. We have groups for young families. We have groups for families with teenagers. We have groups for men and for women and for couples. And we have all different kinds of groups that are available for you. And each group meets regularly, once a week, maybe once every other week. And they focus on learning how to follow Jesus more. They focus on how they can make friends with each other and support each other and pray for each other and care for each other. And many of those groups have an opening for you. And I am encouraging you, if you are not in a group here at Genesis, today is the day for you to take a step. Just try it. See what happens. Just try it. See what happens. If in 3 weeks or 3 months, don't give it 3. You gotta give it more than 3 weeks. For 3 months, you're like, this is not working. You know what? Like, God bless you. We'll try something else. But try it. Just give it a shot. See what happens. Now, signing up for a group is easy. We try to make it easy, as easy as possible. The easiest way today is to go out to the Welcome Center. We'll have someone there to help. And you can sign up online, pick the group you want to sign up for. You'll get connected with their leader, and they'll connect you with their group. You can do that on your own at home. You can go to our website. You can sign up that way. It's super easy to do. And again, just try it. Just try it. And I want to just tell you this too. I know that this can be intimidating. If you're not part of this, you're like, you're meeting some crazy people, and you're going to be like handling snakes and doing all this crazy stuff. Look, we only have one group that handles snakes. No, we don't have to look. I'm just kidding. That's fine. We do that. That's not just it. Here's the thing. I know these leaders personally. I know people leading these groups. They are top notch. You will not be disappointed if you get in one of these groups. They will not make it uncomfortable for you. They will do whatever they can to make you feel welcome. They will do whatever they can to make it feel as if this is a community you can belong to. We can assure you of that. And I know that this is a bit of a risk, but I'm telling you, it is a risk worth taking. You need this in your life. So get in a group. Get in a group. Get in a group. You will hear me say that from now until God takes my last breath. Get in a group. Let me finish with this. Solomon wasn't the only one to talk about the power of community in the way that he did. Jesus actually doesn't quite quote Solomon, but taps into what Solomon was getting at. And he reiterates the power of community in this way. In Matthew chapter 18, verse 20 says, "For where 2 or 3 gather together as my followers, I am there among them." I am there among them. Let's pray. God, it is, as we come to the end of this series, I know that this has been, for so many of us here, it's so helpful, both to recognize that there is a battle going on. We have a target on our back, and the devil is coming after us, and that you have given us everything that we need to be prepared to fight back. I just pray, God, that as we leave this series and move forward in what we're doing, God, that you would give us the courage to step into greater community, that we would have the courage to be a part of a smaller group of people who we can care for and love and support and cherish, that would fuel our commitment to you. And God, that we would be a source of encouragement and enable us to fuel the commitment of others in a small community. Thank you for modeling that. Jesus, when you came, that you didn't do this in life in isolation. In fact, you were very intentional about being in community with other people. You needed that. Even in your darkest, deepest, sorrowful moments, you needed community. And even though it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't exactly maybe as we imagined it would be, it was something that you recognized, I need this. I need this to fuel my commitment. So give us the courage, God, to be in community with one another, to take a step, to continue in that vein if we already are doing so. And ultimately, God, we know that when we gather together, whether it be in this space on a Sunday morning or in a house on a Tuesday night, you are there among us. And we know that when you're there among us, that our commitment to you is being fueled over and over and over again. And that the unseen world, the battles that we're fighting, we can begin to push them back. We can overcome anything with you in the center of our lives. God, we thank you. Thank you for the fact that you created us to be a community, to love one another as you've loved us. I just pray that as a church, we would continue to move forward in that way. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.